Hello, my beautiful friends. I'm Nasreen, and here we talk about Reiki, personal growth, and the subtle ways energy and awareness shape our everyday lives. In this video, conversation around guided meditation and self hypnosis. I'm joined by Ryan Montes, who helps good coaches become absolute game changers through focused training, mentoring, and collaboration that actually works. I truly had a wonderful time in this conversation, and I hope you enjoy listening as much as I did. There's nothing you need to analyze or figure out here. Just listen gently. Notice what lands for you and allow the conversation to unfold. Let's begin. Welcome. And today I am really happy to be joined by someone who played a big role in my own journey, Ryan Montes. Ryan is a hypnotherapy and NLP instructor. And what I've always appreciated about him is the way he teaches. It's grounded, practical, and always sharing all of his knowledge, not holding on, keeping anything secret. And I first attended one of his self hypnosis class as a complete skeptic. And I loved it so much that I went on to take his hypnosis training and later NLP as well. And yeah, what stayed with me wasn't really just the technique, but the way Ryan helped people experience change rather than force it. I actually have a story about that maybe we can talk. And so today I invited Ryan here to have a conversation, not a lecture on like guided meditation or hypnosis or anything like that, but what's really happening when people drop into these states and what this is really. So, Ryan, welcome, and I'm really glad you are here.
Thank you, Nazarene. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm very excited to hear this story that you're going to share about experiencing change instead of forcing it, because I don't know what story that is. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. Very excited to talk about one of my favorite subjects with one of my favorite students.
Thank you.
Well, things are always new, but since you went through the training with me, I'm still doing training like that. These days, I'm doing more of what I would describe as like a full spectrum training. So the people that come into my program, I have a longer program, and yes, we look at skills like hypnosis and self-hypnosis and NLP and timeline therapy, which is very powerful. But I'm doing a lot more of the business coaching and the mindset coaching these days now. So the people that are coming in are, getting the full character and business development, not just any one aspect. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. Beyond that, still living in Canada. Still, as you can see, it's winter here right now.
Ryan is also in Canada, and so am I. I'm in Toronto. Um, you are in Ottawa?
I'm just outside of
Right.
Ottawa.
Okay.
I'm actually on the Quebec side of the border, but just it's the Ottawa region. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's why we are on Zoom. We are not physically in the same location. So, and when you mentioned that you have kind of, yeah, transitioned into more business sort of training, that is always interesting. And I have also participated in some of those containers, and it was really useful. And I always tell myself if I followed exactly what, you had said right from the beginning, I would be where you are. The, business would have grown exponentially. I feel like, but that's the thing, right? That we can't follow through. We can only do so much, sort of a thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
things we can do our very best and things are going to develop often at the rate that they're going to develop at. And, I think a lot of people when they look back on their journey, um, probably don't have a problem with that, Like when you're in the moment, it's easy to say, "Oh, I wish I could double my income in the next 3 weeks." But then, when that eventually happens and you look back, at least it's been my experience to say, maybe I wasn't ready, and maybe now I'm ready, right? And all things in due time, in other words.
yeah, that's true. And trying to figure out, not trying to, figuring out what is most important for you in your life, I guess, in that moment. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. And what's your story about actually getting into hypnosis or
Yeah.
like doing this sort of work?
Yeah, that's always a fun story to get into for not just for me, but for anybody who's into like hypnosis and unconscious mind work. It's always really interesting. I always ask the same thing if I'm interviewing people, how did you get into all this stuff? And for me, before I was in this business and unconscious mind work and business coaching and NLP training and all this stuff, I was in the army. I was in the Canadian Army for 5 years, and before that, I was a private detective for a number of years here in Canada. And actually, my interest in hypnosis specifically, and also NLP, and really in personal development, started in my late teens, early 20s. I had a lot of emotional challenges and confidence challenges and just general life challenges that were really, really holding me back from what I wanted to do. And so, my avenue forward was personal development. And that very quickly led me to, from books and courses, led me to learning about the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, and then the tools to influence the subconscious mind. Some of the most efficient of those tools being hypnosis, self-hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, etc. So, it was back then, late teens, early 20s. I started dabbling with the tools, learning about them, using them for self. And over the years, I was learning more and more and more and using the tools more and more and more. So it was actually quite a journey. It was about a more than a decade journey from starting to using to benefiting to sharing with others and using in other careers to becoming a trainer and a coach myself.
Oh, wow. And yes, I've heard this story before, obviously, but it always fascinates me to know that you were a private investigator because that's something that, I don't know anybody who does, who has been, who's done that before. So, but I can understand, yeah, that I guess developed the keen eye or kind of seeing behind the scenes or hearing the conversation or the words without hearing it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. That's a good way to put it. When we're experiencing life, and I think this is something all humans can relate to. When we're experiencing life, there's what's immediately visible, and then there's everything else going on behind the scenes. When you're looking at a person, you can see what you can see, and there's a whole other almost galaxy that exists within every individual person. People go inward infinitely, right? Um, and so the way I think of it is, when I was a private detective, the name of the game was really always having to look beyond what was visible on the surface in a situation, in a case, in a person, in an environment, and get keen about understanding what's going on behind the scenes, people's motivations, people's intent, what's being subcommunicated. And that is a skill that has served me well, in that context, in my personal life, and definitely in coaching and training for sure. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. The first time I came to your class, I was a skeptic, and I always told myself, oh, I'm never going to be hypnotized. And I came into your self-hypnosis class. A friend, said, I'm going, come on, come along. So I said, well, I don't know what this is. I don't believe, and I don't believe I will ever be hypnotized. But, you've got to learn about it before making a decision. Because with Reiki too, I've had so many skeptics, people like, no, I don't think Reiki works, right? And so I told myself, let's get in and find out. And one of the things you said over there is that never say you cannot be hypnotized. um,
Um, So there's a famous quote
yeah,
from a very famous hypnotist that I sometimes repeat. It's not my quote. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of jokey quote, but it's
yeah.
who was it that would say it? Now I don't remember which famous hypnotist it was, or if it kind of is unclear which one of them specifically said it. But the quote is never tell people um you can't be hypnotized because you're telling them you're stupid, right? It's some variation of that. Because what a lot of, and like I said, it's a joke, but what the general public thinks about hypnosis is that it's something that somebody else does to you, right? When in reality, hypnosis is something you do within yourself. It's a choice that you make. So, like saying I can't be hypnotized is no different than saying I can't meditate, or I can't sit still and pay attention to my own thoughts, or I can't exercise, right? Because the experience, it puts the onus to create the experience outside of self when it is totally within self, right?
Yes. And so that's the second thing that I learned, that all hypnosis are self-hypnosis. And it was a wonderful experience, because that was like a first experience with you. And instantly I thought, oh, okay, Ryan teaches in a very similar way that I would want to. Like, I teach Reiki. Then I felt like I needed to go and explore more. And I signed up for the hypnosis training. So when I recall, and in those days, you didn't mention too much about energy, or the energy part was behind. But the more and more I got to know you, or over the years as I trained with you, got into your different containers, I realized that you began to talk more about energy.
Mm.
So what's that part? And have you done Reiki?
I still haven't done a Reiki training yet, although now you've brought it back into my mind, so maybe this year will finally be the year. But I've definitely experienced Reiki in different forms, and always enjoyed it. I think. Yeah, I'm still kind of like that, when I'm teaching hypnosis, I like to stick to the facts and keep it very, um um true to just the methodology, right? And hypnosis, the style, at least the style I teach, is very much founded in traditional psychology and or maybe not traditional psychology, but psychology nonetheless. And it's a very scientific approach, right? However, and I know you'll agree, the more you experience profound change and you observe um, transformation in others, I think the more clear it becomes that, and we know this, and this is a scientific fact, true too. We're all energy, right? And energy influences energy, and I would argue energy can't not influence energy around it, right? So, I think regardless of a person's model of the world, it's helpful to consider that when experiencing life.
Yes, I agree. Uh, and me too. I'm a skeptic as far as the energy is concerned too, or was, I should say, because now obviously, like everything is about energy. And although Reiki is very much energy work, it's still very, the way that I teach is very grounded and very practical. And the energy just follows. I mean, you can't separate it, because, like you said, we are energy beings. I think that's really the foundation for everything. And so, if you are energy worker doing Reiki, having this knowledge of how the mind works, that logical part, that scientific part, is very complementary, and it helps, I think, ground this floating energy sort of thing. So for me personally, definitely it has like merged in so well. And when I now do my Reiki guided meditations, the knowledge from the hypnosis and the NLP training has definitely helped. And I think it has come in a lot. But because I'm a Reiki person, although I've taken your training, I am not able to, I guess, explain it, why it matters. And so that's why I thought this would be a wonderful conversation. And I've always wanted to kind of take it apart and, figure out what's happening in a meditation.
Yeah,
So. Yeah. And
yeah.
again, during the classes, I do remember, again, when we were doing inductions, you said, some of the guided meditations, when you listen to it carefully, you'll find that there's a pattern, and things like that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of overlap between guided meditation, or even unguided meditation, and hypnotic processes. And I really agree with you. You're not the only person who's well trained in Reiki who's come through my trainings. There's been others, and many people have reported that there's a synergy that's created when you combine a powerful modality like Reiki with, an additional way to relate to a person's mind, like hypnosis, whether it's guided hypnosis, session work, or you training people to do self-hypnosis in conjunction with Reiki. I've seen people have great impact by combining these. When we look at a person, and this applies to self as well, we have the person, and then, we have the rest of the person, right? We have the body, and we have what's going on in their mind at any given moment. And then we have everything else. And like I said, like in my perception, a person, um, exists inward infinitely, right? And that inward, infinite is basically what a hypnotist would describe as your unconscious mind, right? Everything about you that is not in your conscious awareness, everything that makes you who you are, your memories, your beliefs, your unconscious processes, they're all in your unconscious mind, right? Greater than 99% of what makes you who you are is outside of your conscious awareness and lives. It is the domain of the subconscious or the unconscious mind. And so hypnosis is simply a tool that people can use to gain access and gain influence over their own subconscious mind in order to change beliefs, change behaviors, change attitudes, change capabilities, um, or perhaps release things that they've been unable to release, either because they didn't know how or they weren't even aware that they were there. So, hypnosis is it's the doorway, or it's the bridge from the conscious to the powerful unconscious mind. Does that answer the question?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
I think so. And of course, because the knowledge is vast, we can't, explain obviously everything, but just so, like you said, it's the doorway. So anybody who has, uh, got into Reiki because they want to transform themselves, they want to change themselves, and they're listening to, I guess, Reiki guided meditations or just general meditations to achieve that change on their own. I think having to understand how this kind of sort of works, or maybe what are the things that they can look in when they are listening to guided meditations to know whether it's actually helping or it's just in the passing, or what's happening in the passing in the unconscious mind, because it's in the unconscious mind you don't really realize. So having that understanding, I think, is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree for sure.
Yeah.
When we talk about hypnosis, it's the gateway to make influence, to create influence on our own unconscious mind. And we can either do this completely alone internally, and that's generally described as self-hypnosis. And sometimes it's aided by a recording or an external experience like Nazarene has created. And we're going to listen to a little bit now. It's still self-hypnosis because the person is just being guided by an audio track or by a practitioner or whatever. And then there's traditional session hypnosis, where one person is hypnotizing, and I put this in quotes, one person is guiding the other person, the client, into a hypnotic state. But really, guide is the correct word, right? The hypnotist is merely helping the client to create a context within their own mind where hypnosis occurs. It's still the client that's actually doing the work, creating the context and allowing the hypnosis and the suggestion and the influence over the unconscious mind to occur. So, lots of different ways to do this. It can be done guided, unguided. It can be done with a hypnotist or without. It can be done, in a lot of different ways. But one of the most powerful ways is via one like a guided hypnosis recording, or a guided, perhaps I should say, hypnotic recording, like Nazarene's going to share with us now, because then it's like, the client, the person who wants to make change or enjoy the process, can do it, you know, basically at any time, anywhere. They don't need to schedule, they don't need to travel, they don't need to, ask anyone's permission, as long as they have the recording. And when you have the recording, You don't need to be a trained person. You don't need to have studied. You just kind of sit, listen, and the magic can happen if you're open to it, which is why I really like a good hypnosis recording or hypnotic recording. One of my favorite guest speakers at one of my masterminds that I used to run was Nazreen when she came in, and she shared a hypnotic experience with us. I don't want to spoil the surprise in case you used any of the like similar techniques in the recordings we're going to listen to now, but it was really, really good. And I think I still have the recording actually.
Okay, thank you. The first clip is from the beginning, where I'm inviting people to settle and reminding them that they don't have to do anything and just receive. If you're familiar with Reiki, you're welcome to connect with it now in your own way. If you're not, that's perfectly okay. Just follow along. I'll be sending Reiki through my voice and through the energy of this meditation. You don't have to do anything special, just receive if you choose. Yes, that's it.
There's a lot of good stuff happening there that we can kind of unpack, and that's just like that's the beginning of one.
Yeah, so I
Right?
have like three clips each for both the meditations.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, I'm very
But
excited to hear all of it. So, do you want me to sort of give you my reaction to what I just heard and what I would describe as going on there?
sure, yeah.
For those that are listening, that's the beginning of a hypnotic experience. There's no question about that. Um, and even if I didn't know you, I know you, of course, and you've worked with me. But even if I didn't know you, in listening just to those few seconds of recording, I would describe this as a person who's trained in hypnotic communication and obviously trained in Reiki. It's literally mentioned. But folks that are watching this recording, I challenge you to listen to the difference in intonation in Nazreen's voice when she's just speaking with me now conversationally versus the recording, because her voice in the recording, even right from the beginning, is very hypnotic. It's not a conversational tone, it's a hypnotic tone, which actually can induce relaxation in the listener just from the intonation, just from the pacing. Um, Also, what I like about that little tidbit that we just heard is that it's creating a positive expectation almost immediately. So it's like priming the listener's mind for the experience by giving these, subtle instructions. And um, it's a really nice and elegant thing to do to give a listener what we might call permission to have the experience, right? And to have their own experience. You use some language in there that kind of was safe for people regardless of their experience or relationship with Reiki. Either way, it was subcommunicated that this is an appropriate experience for them. And again, even if I didn't know you, I would say that's a highly skilled um, Reiki trained and hypnosis trained person who's creating this recording. Those are the few things that popped out to me so far.
Okay. What would it be, versus this if you just got in and I don't know, I would have just started, all right, connect with Reiki and just kind of started it off without having this permission bit. Would it be a different experience as a listener? Like, would the subconscious mind react in a different way?
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
the listener and the subconscious mind would react in a different way. And yeah, so one of the big obstacles with a person listening to a hypnosis recording or even a guided meditation, it's not, overtly hypnotic in nature. One of the biggest obstacles is that often people are wondering, am I doing it right? Is this going to work for me? Right? That's a huge obstacle when, especially when people, they get word that like, oh, this meditation thing, this relaxation is a good thing to do, or maybe they just read a Joe Dispenza book or something like that, and they think, oh yeah, okay, this sounds great, and then they pop onto YouTube and just find a guided meditation. The big obstacle is that if they're sitting there wondering, am I doing this right? Am I breathing right? Am I listening? Am I blah blah blah? That it could be inhibiting their ability to experience the experience. And so you're doing in this recording what I call inoculating the listener against that obstacle, right? You're using language that without directly calling it out will allay that internal resistance that is very normal for people to have when they're experiencing something like a guided meditation or a guided hypnosis for the first time. So again, very elegantly done there.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, so if somebody's already Reiki trained, or even if they're not, but like a really good entryway into being able to use these skills and especially influence and help others with these skills is the 2.5 day or the 3 day it's called, I call it my Krasner hypnotherapy certification, which is one of the first courses you took with me. I still run it. It's extremely powerful. It's extremely life-changing. So I believe the next one's going to be in March or maybe April. It'll be run remotely on Zoom, live on Zoom, so people can attend from anywhere in the world. So just, if people want the specific dates, they can reach out to me directly on Instagram at Ryan Montis NLP or through my website, ryanmontis.com.
We did
Uh,
one of the techniques where it said like to dislike.
yeah.
Um, and I said, okay, I've got to stop drinking this. Is there anything else that you'd like to share we forgot to mention?
I don't think so. Just thank you for inviting me to have this conversation and hang out for an hour. It's been a distinct pleasure. Like I said, now you've reminded me how awesome your stuff is. So tonight I'm going to be, listening to one or two of these recordings again because they're so good. I recommend everybody else does that too. And yeah, if there's anything else I can do to support you and your work, if anybody's watching this and you haven't yet taken or experienced session work with Nazreen, or if you are in the market for Reiki training, I highly recommend Nazreen. Like I said, I haven't taken her training personally, but I've known her for a number of years. I've experienced her Reiki, and I've seen what she does in her business, and she's 10 out of 10, top notch. So this is the person to be connected with if you're looking for Reiki.
Thank you so much for that. And exactly the same thing back to you, Ryan.
Well, I very much appreciate that. Thank you.